All right, we are joined right now with Mr. Arlen Schumer. He is the author and the designer of the Silver Age of comic book art. Arlen, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, man?
I'm doing good, enjoying the East Coast Comicon, the overall ambiance, the atmosphere of it. Having a really fun time. We got to see earlier today your lecture about comic book art in comparison to the greats of, contemporary art and whatnot.
Fine art and classical art, the great masters of the Renaissance human figure, Raphael, Da Vinci, Michelangelo, of course.
Now, in regards to the Silver Age of comic book art, there are many greats. There's Ditko, Steranko, Neil Adams, who else?
Infantino. They're all
Infantino.
right around us.
Gil Kane, whatnot. Out of all of them, who is the one, the ultimate one for you?
Well, I was at the right age, I think, at the right time to be hit by the tsunami that was Neil Adams. When Neil Adams' style hit, if you were a DC comic fan like I was, my brother was the Jack Kirby Marvel fan. Marvel's looked a little too busy for me, too many words. I didn't really appreciate Jack Kirby like my brother did. He was a little older than me. But the DCs had what I call a banal simplicity to them that a kid could get into. Superman, Batman, brightly colored. When Neil Adams came into that world, not the Marvel world, the DC world, and started drawing Superman and Batman and these new characters like Deadman with this realism that we had never seen before. As he says, if superheroes really existed, they would look like the characters I draw. And he was right. Nobody had ever seen the fantasy world of superheroes been treated almost photorealistically. Look at our movies and pop culture today. It's all about taking fantasy and rendering it real. Computer graphics, the movies. It's all about making it look like it's real. Well, Neil Adams did that in comics on a two-dimensional plane in the late 60s like nobody had ever done before. And when I say it was like a tsunami, to anybody listening to this that was there like I was as a kid knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I've spent my professional career basically doing projects, lectures, books, articles, basically paying it all back. My whole Silver Age book, my lectures, is all about showing the work of men who influenced me and made me become an artist and make a living. So all I'm doing is giving it back in the forms of the art that I make as a graphic designer and lecturer and illustrator. My whole career, whether it's the art that I make, the illustrations I make, the writing I do, the lectures I give, the book, it's all about giving back to the art forms that, as a child, blew my mind. It's just like a musician picks up the guitar when they're 10 years old for some reason. It's a song they heard or a performance they saw. Well, that's what I'm doing with my stuff. So even though I love all the artists of the Silver Age, they're like, the 8 artists in my book are like 8 of my children in a way. I can't pick, because I love certain things about each one, but emotionally, which is how we remember, the things we do as adults are because of the things that struck our emotions when we were kids. And it could be a negative thing like child abuse, that affects you the rest of your life, but I'm lucky to say it was the positive things, the music, the art that affected me as a child, but that's why we're all here, is because the stuff we witnessed and saw that affected us as a child. It's all creative art and writing, basically. And that's why I became an artist. So out of all of them, yeah, Neil Adams had the biggest impact on me viscerally.
Now, in regards to the book, The Silver Age of Comic Book Art, how can people get a copy of this book?
They can go right to my website, arlenschumer.com. Make sure they spell my name right, ARLENSCHUMER. And they can get a signed copy there. There's links to the cheaper non-signed version directly from the publisher, Archway. There's a digital version for $10. I mean, the book is meant to be a beautiful print book, but if you're on a digital platform, these brightly colored, primary colored images on that electronic platform, they literally leap off the screen. So people should check that out.
I know you designed the entire book, and it's an absolutely gorgeous thing, all the way down to the outside of the book. If you look, there's a copy right there, yeah. The jacket and whatnot. Now we're doing this as both a visual medium for this and a audio one, so take a look at this. And
I mean, for DC and Marvel to allow a joint character illustration of both their heroes in the same image and let me sign it, I mean, that doesn't happen every day. So when they approved this, I couldn't believe it, really. But it's a wraparound illustration. In my opinion, especially to the people that owned the original edition 11 years ago, this wraparound illustration is worth the price of the book.
Now, the wraparound is actually an homage. Who is it an homage to?
Each of the characters on the cover, I drew in the style of the artist most associated with that character, using the positions of the characters that they're most associated with in terms of what is the most iconic Iron Man image. It's this one by Gene Colan from Iron Man #1, which when you open up to the Gene Colan chapter, as I try to find it right here, of course, I reward you by giving you that cover right there. It's small, but it's there. So everything in my book references everything else. Everything you need to know about all these characters and the artists is in this book.
And you actually pointed out some interesting things about, like, for example, Gene Colan's art. I'm a big fan of Colan, and I discovered him through like Howard the Duck and how gorgeous that stuff was. And then reading through the Iron Man run, you point out little things like the expression in the Iron Man mask that Colan managed to pull off.
Colan, if you look at the cover image that I used, the portrait image that I used here, each of the artists, I start off with a large head that's most indicative. If you look at this Colan Iron Man mask, it's almost like you can see the tragedy of the man trapped in the iron mask, from the classic novel. But Colan brought that to his Iron Man. So yes, there are times in Iron Man where he looks like the armored warrior, but you always get the sense, and that's why I chose this image. And again, I know what makes these images and the artists tick, so it doesn't surprise me that it resonates with other people when they get the book. It's like, yeah, that's the Gene Colan Iron Man. I know instinctively that's what we all loved about that. And that love and knowledge and understanding I have of this material literally comes across on every page. And if you grew up with this stuff or just coming to it fresh, you're going to learn so much on every single spread that you did not know before.
Now, there isn't just, high praise for this book from people who are comic book fans, but there's also praise for the book from people through the comic book community, such as the creators themselves. And actually, you have some praise in this book from the creators themselves that you featured.
Gene Colan, before he passed away, even though I was only able to give him 8 pages in my book, he's the artist with the least amount of pages. My original proposal was for a 300-page book. This is 196 pages, so imagine the 100 pages that didn't make it in. So the point is he said that my chapter on his work is the greatest thing on his work ever done. My little 8 pages. And then, I got letters of praise from people like Steve Ditko, who's like the J.D. Salinger of comics. He barely writes or hardly ever endorses anything. And yet he wrote a beautiful note to my publisher about how much he loved the Silver Age book. So I have that book in my scrap. I have that written note in my scrapbook, and I posted it on my Facebook. I have a Facebook group for the Silver Age, and I posted it there. So again, very high honor. Alan Moore has a blurb about the book, and Will Eisner, the father of the graphic novel, blurbed my book. So if you don't want to take my word for it, if you trust the father of the graphic novel and the greatest living comic book writer, buy my book.
Absolutely. Now, in regards to the design of the book, we keep going back to the book. I still want to go. There's more. It's such a beautiful book.
It's just one page after the other. Stop where you want.
From one graphic designer to another. The thing I pointed out was at one time was it looks like you're reading a comic book about comic books. Exactly. The layout is perfect.
I show in the Kirby section, for instance, on his Captain America, which was his favorite character to do. This might look like a single page of Captain America comics, but it's not. It's made up of 3 different sequences from 3 different stories. And then I took out the original text, and I've got Kirby talking about how he choreographs fight scenes like violent ballets. Then you turn the page, and you get his negative zone and collages, and then all the text in the word balloons is Kirby talking about how he designed and why he designed these collages. So you read it like a comic book, but it's also an art book and a history book. In the Gil Kane chapter that follows Kirby, he was an acolyte of Kirby. So look at what I do here. On the Adam page, he talks about how he's all about ballet, trampoline, and jumping in his work. So the image I give you is the Atom jumping on a little eraser, using it like a trampoline to leap like a ballet dancer and punch the bad guy. So just like comics are words and pictures working together, as a graphic designer, verbal, visual communication, I give you in pictures what the artist is saying in words. So yeah, you read it like a comic book, but it's an art book and it's a history book at the same time. And a dessert topping and a floor wax.
This is
all
true.
All you SNL fans out there that know what I'm referring to.
That's a hell of
Early
a reference.
Chevy Chase SNL skit.
That's a hell of a
It's
reference.
a dessert topping. It's a floor wax. A dessert topping. No, it's both.
I love that.
Yeah.
Now, Mike is a big fan of the work of Neil Adams, like Dead Man and whatnot. Mike, do you have any questions for him regarding the Dead Man run?
All right. About Neil, not Neil in particular, but is there any
Dead Man run? I've got it right here, baby.
But
I devote many pages to Dead Man.
a couple months ago I started getting to Dead Man, and it's awesome.
That's where he made his bones.
Awesome,
Neil
like
Adams
the
came
artwork,
from-
like that one
No pun
page.
intended, by the way.
Thank you. You're a man of good taste.
Thank you.
He came from the comic strip world. He was the youngest artist at 21 to be given a syndicated comic strip, Ben Casey, when he was 21. So if you notice by this image I give you, Ben Casey's head abstractly split up into the three tiers of the Sunday comic strip version. But when Neil got to comic books and Dead Man was the first strip he worked on where he could really strut his stuff, it's like he took what he was trying to do in comic strips, but they were too conformed. The daily 3 panels, the Sunday strip, but when he had the comic book page, he busted out. And Dead Man is where his genius for not only photorealistic drawing and emotions, his layouts, cinematic, his page designs, his inking, everything about Dead Man was groundbreaking, and that was what made his bones. If you know about Walt Simonson's work, in the same way that strip Manhunter, when he burst on the scene with that strip in the backup of Detective Comics, that was the strip that everybody recognized that made his bones. Well, Dead Man was Neil Adams' Manhunter, or vice versa. And it's all here in my book. I mean, look at this image. Because of his mastering of the drawing, you can feel that. You do. That, as Dead Man feels it, you feel it. Ironic that a man named Dead Man, a character named Dead Man, when he says I'm alive, is more alive than other comic characters, and yet his name is Dead Man. So these images are like some of Dead Man's greatest hits in a way. And this page, of course, ranks as one of his great. Look at what Graphiste magazine said about Neil Adams in 1972. This upper line here. An innovator in several ways, Neil Adams, juggling incessantly with his pictures to striking effect, remains the master of narrative technique. If that's not a definition of this page, that's why I gave it to you.
That's an awesome. That page right there alone is like something you would see all up again in an art
Now,
gallery.
in my lecture, I projected these panels, if you remember, one at a time to build a page. So in a lecture format, I can actually sequentially get across the sequential nature of comics themselves.
I agree. I mean, like you were saying, you almost feel like the emotions, like the tragedy of Dead Man. Like in the beginning, first beginning, pages of the first issue, you feel bad about the guy. Like he doesn't know why he's dead.
He cries out, "Arg!" Nobody had ever drawn a character with such extreme emotion in comics before Neil Adams did. You had Hulk smash, you had, the Human Torch being a hothead, you had sort of pseudo-emotion as the comic characters can best draw it. But nobody, I do a whole spread in my book about Neil's faces. Nobody before Neil Adams showed this range. I mean, good luck drawing Batman crying through a cowl. And yet somehow Neil Adams pulled it off.
It's almost like
Chunky going through cold turkey, biting his hand. I mean, if you're an artist, good luck drawing these things. The fact that he was able to draw other ethnicities was groundbreaking. Instead of just taking a white person, coloring him brown and saying, look, I drew a black person, which is how most white comic artists drew black people. They were white people colored brown before Neil Adams. He came along and drew black people as they looked in real life. Look at this image from the famous Green Lantern Green Arrow sequence People think he worked from a photograph for that image. He made that up out of his head, and yet it looks like a photograph. That's a guy who can draw.
Like you were saying about the emotions, the page before that.
Yeah.
It's like, the charts they got, like, I'm feeling happy today, I'm feeling sad today. You could look without any words whatsoever, you could almost tell what they're feeling.
As an illustrator, Neil's job is to bring the words to life. So look at this very first image. And Mike, read that out loud. Can you read that?
Suddenly, Green Lantern glimpses her fate and feels remorse and regret and terrible, nameless ache
Now, your job as an artist is to get across a face expressing abstract ideas like remorse. And what was the other? Sadness. Look at that drawing of Green Lantern's face and tell me if he didn't, as an illustrator, bring those words to life. You feel what you're reading. That's what comics are. Words and images working together. What made Neil Adams hit like a tsunami is nobody had ever exploited that relationship as humanly, as really. And here he is at this convention. He's talking tomorrow, and, I lectured about him, and here I am, still honoring him as the great artist, in his heyday when his stuff hit.
And real quick with that Green Lantern image, not just that, it's a guy conveying the emotion through the mask. That's impossible to do sometimes,
Look at the first image. I mean, this is turning into a Neil Adams podcast, but that's okay. Look at the image I use for his main portrait image. Like I said in my lecture, good luck drawing a grown man crying. If you think that's easy to draw for you artists out there, good luck. Good luck drawing a superhero with a mask crying. But that's Neil Adams. And did I choose the right portrait image?
Yeah, it's an awesome picture.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It really is. Now, you were telling us before, you have a Neil Adams sketchbook.
I designed the Neil Adams sketchbook in 1999, which I think is still in print. You can buy it, I think, through Neil's site, and maybe the original hardcover through the Vanguard publishing site. But to me, again, they are sketchbooks about artists that are usually collections of sketches. This is the single best sketchbook an artist ever done because, once again, all the words are by Neil Adams. I edited it all. So it's a primer on the art of sketching itself. You will learn more about what a sketch is supposed to be about, the job it's supposed to do, than you will learn from any other sketchbook. And in a way, I'm telling you a story about sketching itself in this book. So if you like Neil Adams and you love artist sketches, trust me, in the same way my Silver Age book is unique, because I have every book about comics history. They were all boring, text-heavy with miniature reproductions. My book reverses that paradigm. Most sketchbooks were just random sketches of an artist. I give this sketchbook a beginning, middle, and end that you could read like a book and absorb a point of view and learn about the art of sketching itself. Some of the sketches are printed actual thumbnail size. Some of them I blow up so that you can see their energy and expressiveness. So trust me, get that sketchbook.
Now, in regards to, the Silver Age in general, there's a lot of, artists nowadays that are trying to mimic that style,
Are they? Really?
Yeah, they want, the influence, the Neil Adams, the Jack Kirby's of the world. You see the comics now. Do you see any artists nowadays that, maybe they'll be the next generation of that?
Well, there's a lot of great artists out there. Mostly the mainstream Marvel and DC superhero stuff, it looks a little all the same to me. It's all slickly produced, better paper, slick coloring, but the artists don't really stand out. They all seem to be all competent. They don't have the range of individual styles. The artists I follow are, to me, cut from the old school. Guys like Mike Allred. There's a new artist, Amy Reeder, who does Rocket Girl, who's great. I follow the independent guys like Burns and Daniel Clowes and Chris Ware. Those are our modern greats. I think the greatest mainstream comic artist is probably J.H. Williams III, who teamed up with Alan Moore in Promethea, and he's working on this Neil Gaiman thing. I think he's the single best kind of mainstream sequential graphic artist because his layouts and design, everything he does, are pretty mind-blowing.
It's really funny that the first person you mentioned was Mike Allred. I'm a big fan of him myself, and he is the closest thing we'll see.
He's some sort of combination of Ditko and Kirby, and a little bit of Gil Kane. I mean, he's sort of got it all in his style, but he's also a great writer. And, his body of work that he's been producing for the last 25 years now is a pretty awesome body of work. So I've always been a big fan of his. And like I said, if I were to stop and think of some of the current artists, that I like, I can probably give you more names. But like I said, that's pretty much the way I look at it today. And again, I spend most of my time, trying to keep the Silver Age alive, because I really believe the way we look back on the Renaissance masters of the human figure 500 years ago, Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Raphael, I really believe 500 years from now, they're going to look back at Neil Adams and Joe Kubert and Infantino and all the guys in my book as our modern masters of the human figure. And maybe they'll look at my book as an example of, you see, this is the proof, because this guy knew it at the time. So the lesson here is that I'm trying to make the future by creating something in the present that will end up making the future by just existing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, before we go, once again, how can people get a hold of you on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and whatnot?
Well, best thing is my website, arlenschumer.com. From there, there's links to my Facebook site, my YouTube channel, my Twitter account. But again, I'm on Twitter. Just put in the name Arlen Schumer. I'm on Facebook. I run 2 comic history Facebook groups, one for the Silver Age and one for Neil Adams, called Neil Adams Almanac, that have been called the best comics history discussion groups on the net. And really, we get great conversation. If you think, I thought I knew every piece of Neil Adams artwork, I was blown away by the artwork being posted on my own site. I mean, finished art I've never seen, sketches I've never seen. So if I could be blown away, and you're an average Adams fan, trust me. And the Silver Age group, the same thing. So Facebook friend me, join my groups, and, they can email me at arlenschumer.com if they want. And everything is available through my website, my book, etc.
Sounds good. And once again, how can somebody get a hold of your book?
Again, arlenschumer.com. They can get a signed and sketched in copy. They can get an unsigned copy. They can get the digital version, all through sites in my book.
Sounds good. Once again, thank you so much for being on.
Peter, man. Thank you. Mike.